To not flunk out of college, I changed my grades and thousands of others as well. When I was a student at a major university in the late 80s, I was failing several classes miserably. I had completely screwed up in 2 of my 6 classes, and I needed to make a plan of how not to flunk out. For one class, I decided to dedicate all my spare time in correcting where I went wrong and fix it by acing the final exam. The other class, which was much more technical, required that I come up with a plan. Keep in mind that I was a total goody-two-shoes kid who felt like they were in a desperate situation. Failing out of college was not something I could allow to happen. Desperate times, desperate measures. The class that I needed to pass was a science engineering class that I had not bothered to go to. So I went to the very last Thursday class to figure out my plan. One thing the professor did say was that if you had a 93 or higher average in the class, you could opt out of the final exam that was happening in 1 week. I had a 64 average, so I had to take the exam. How was I going to ace this exam? My grades were too low to get pulled up enough. The only way to fix this was to get my grades changed. So I came up with a Hail Mary plan. One that involved a few rules to be broken, and by rules, I mean laws. The science building where the class was given would close for the weekend. This meant that the professor's offices were locked, and most of the labs were locked as well. You could still get into the main parts of the building, but you had to talk to a security person if it was after hours. There wasn't digital badges and shit like that back then. So, here was my plan. On Friday afternoon, after most classes were over, I scoped out the whole building. It was a U-shaped building that was 3 stories tall. I had to find a way in. Luckily, I found one of the first-floor labs on the inside of the U had large horizontal windows that could be unlocked and would allow for someone to crawl through. Even better, one of the lab's windows were obscured by a small fenced-in area that housed some of the electrical and HVAC units. Large bushes lined the fence as well. So while I was there, I went into the lab and unlocked a window to allow myself a place to enter the building. The door of the lab was propped open and I unpropped it and let it close. It locked. Good to know. It also reduced the chances of someone relocking the window. I also scoped out the professor's office. It was open, but he was not there. It was very small with no windows. Just enough room for a desk, his chair, and a couple of other chairs. His office door was an all-metal door painted beige, except for a small center window in the middle. The window had a wire screen built into the glass held in place by a simple, screwed-on frame. There were lots of manila envelopes and schedules, etc. on the door as well. This would be a challenge, but I'd formed my plan. At around 3:30 in the morning, I arrived back at the building with my backpack and a plan to break into the building. I had a hammer, pliers, a roll of tape, and some screwdrivers that I had scrounged, and I was nervous as hell. I made way through the bushes and climbed over the fence. I checked the window, and it was still unlocked. I pulled myself up through the window and into the dark lab. Remembering that the lab doors would lock behind you, I slowly opened the lab door and placed some tape on the lock to stop it from locking. I was expecting a quiet building, but instead was greeted by the loud sound of machinery running. Another lab was conducting an all-night test or something, and at least 3 upper-level students were there overseeing the project. In a way that was good because my presence wouldn't necessarily be noticeable by others. I would find out later that it would also cover any noises I made. I made my way to the professor's office door, which was in a more out-of-the-way part of the building. The office was located right by one of the stairwells, so I could hear anyone coming down the stairs, and also, if someone happened to start coming from the other way, I could use the stairs for a quick exit. I pulled out the screwdriver to start unscrewing the frame around the glass window in his door, and soon realized that the screws were covered in decades of paint. Not good. What I thought was going to be a 2-minute job turned into a 45-minute job. I went into what I would call fuck it mode, and just went to town on this window frame. I had a few starts and stops, but no one came by. I got the frame off and tried to pry the glass out of the frame. It was sealed in with paint. Getting the glass out took a monumental amount of slow prying and steady effort. After 30 minutes of scraping and gentle pressure, I had the glass pane out. I slowly reached in and turned the lock to unlock the door. I grabbed a large manila folder on the outside of door and repositioned it over the window, a perfect cover for the now mold-up window. I slid into the office and looked for something to cover the window that would block light. The desk calendar worked well and a few pieces of tape held it up well. Then I turned the lights on to survey the scene. I was now presented with a desk, a chair, and small slim table behind the desk. Of all the ways my plan could go wrong, my biggest fear was that the professor may have taken all of his grades home with him. A quick look into the large flat file on his desk, and I had his full handwritten grade register in my hands, and the pen he used for recording grades was tucked right inside. He taught 6 classes that semester, and I only needed to change 1 grade. My grade, however, now that I had seen how banged up the paint was on the glass window frame, I knew I had to alter the plan. I searched through the gradebook and found all of my grades and saw I had several in the 70s and some lower 60s grades. I had done some work in the class. I thought it over for a few seconds and started executing Plan B. I went through every single class he had and began randomly changing anything in the 60s to read as in the 80s. Then I went through and changed all the 70s I found to read as 90s. I realized that the changed grades wouldn't stand up under close scrutiny, so I had to create a herd immunity of changed grades. I noticed a few bad students in some of his classes and made some extra efforts at changing their grades. A 0, now an 88. This was taking a while. Now an 88. This was taking a while. With 6 classes and 50 students or so in each class, and about 10 grades per student, there was about 3,000 grades in this register. He changed that, and about 10 grades per course. I pulled on the drawer and realized it was now locked, but wasn't before. Okay, so maybe he'll think he locked it. No big deal.